The Stand, Stephen King's intense tale about the apocalypse and beyond, the epic battle of good versus evil in a world destroyed by disease. Published as a novel in 1978 and then adapted as a TV miniseries in 1994, The Stand shows the outbreak of a deadly flu virus called Captain Trips, and after most of the population succumbs to the terrifying illness, those whom are left walking the earth must decide if they want to join the forces of good or evil. As an evil demonic being known as Randall Flagg plans on taking control of the world and shaping it in his warped and twisted vision, in which the special starred many well-known Hollywood actors, including Gary Sinise, Molly Ringwald, Rob Lowe, and many more. So join with me today as we celebrate the end of the world, well, at least Stephen King's vision of it, as we look into 10 things that you didn't know about The Stand. Rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub. Number 10. Roots of the novel. Stephen King explains that The Stand is simply a story about the end of the world, where we see survivors who survived the apocalypse try to pick up the pieces, and one half of the survivors are led by a source of good, whereas the other half are led by a source of evil. The roots of this story can be traced as far back as 1969, when King wrote a short story called Night Surf, which featured a deadly flu virus. He got his influence from a 1968 incident in which 6,000 sheep dropped dead in the state of Utah due to supposed chemical testing. When King decided to expand on the Captain Trips virus and write The Stand, he did it with making an epic Lord of the Rings styled fantasy epic, a tale of heroes having to go on a long journey to defeat evil. Only, according to King, in his Lord of the Rings inspired epic, there was no hobbit but a Texan called Stu, and no Dark Lord but a supernatural drifter called Randall Flagg. That, and I don't remember anyone singing "Baby Can You Dig Your Man" in Lord of the Rings. Number 9. Drastic cuts had to be made. Given that King was writing a Lord of the Rings inspired masterpiece, naturally it was going to be one big epic novel. By the time King finished The Stand's manuscript, it consisted of a whopping 1,200 pages and weighed 12 pounds, with King joking that it weighed the same amount as a bowling ball. The publishing company, Doubleday, told King that they couldn't publish a 1,200-page book, as the glue that the company used to bind the pages together for their books would fall apart. So King had to do what no creator wants to do and cut huge chunks of his story out, removing 400 pages to be precise. But King also used the editing exercise to improve his story, where King added elements to the story such as the inclusion of Trash Can Man and a scene where the characters have to take refuge from a twister. And thus, finally, in 1978, The Stand could be published, where it became a bestseller. Number 8. Origins of the name. The story's name, The Stand, is obviously a reference to the struggle of good versus evil in the story, about the heroes taking a stand and facing the forces of evil for the good of mankind. However, interestingly, King got the title from a Bruce Springsteen song, Jungle Land. Now, this isn't the first time that King got a title of his books from a song lyric. Another case of this happening is The Shining, which got its name from the John Lennon song Instant Karma, which featured the lyric, "We all shine on." Springsteen's 1975 song featured the lyric, "Tonight all is silence in the world as we take our stand." I guess the lyric hit a nerve with King and resonated with his story, and thus his tale became known as The Stand. Number 7. The Stand was going to be a theatrical movie directed by George A. Romero. King always felt that The Stand could be converted into a movie, and throughout the 80s he did try to get a theatrical version of The Stand off the ground. He teamed up with film director and friend George A. Romero to bring The Stand onto the big screen, with George A. Romero directing. Which makes sense, as during the 80s the horror pair worked on several projects together, namely the anthology movie Creepshow. However, despite having to shorten The Stand for the big screen, King was struggling to condense The Stand for a movie feature length, and at one stage even considered The Stand theatrically in 2 parts, something that has ironically recently happened with his It novel. However, King was then approached to make The Stand into a mini-series to be shown on ABC consisting of 4 two-hour episodes. This would have been perfect for two reasons. One, having The Stand as a miniseries would allow more of the novel's story to be used rather than making big cuts for a movie duration. And two, at that time, the Stephen King miniseries were becoming really popular, thanks to It, The Tommyknockers, and Langoliers. Number 6. Potential flags. The Shining had Jack Nicholson, It had Tim Curry, and the big question is who was going to be the next face playing a memorable Stephen King villain. When it came time to casting the miniseries' main villain, the comically charming yet utterly evil Randall Flagg, several actors were considered for playing the demon with a love of mullets and denim jackets. Big names that were thrown around included Christopher Walken, James Woods, Jeff Goldblum, and Willem Dafoe. However, all the actors turned the role down, so it was then decided to cast an unknown in the role, where Chicago Hope star Jamie Sheridan took on the Randall Flagg mantle, to which he injected a lot of humour and power into the role, and had a desirable evil charm about him. So much so the character Randall Flagg has become a fan favourite, and Sheridan's performance is considered a highlight in the Stand miniseries.
Still, just imagine if Christopher Walken was cast as Randall Flagg. That would have been awesome soup. Yep, indeed, that most definitely would have been awesome soup.
Number 5. King also wrote the miniseries screenplay. There was lots of great talent behind the making of the Stand miniseries. This includes none other than Stephen King himself, who wrote the screenplay, which makes sense as a pet peeve of King seems to have been filmmakers butchering his stories when adapting them to live action. The Stand was also directed by Mick Garris, who is a big-time Hollywood screenwriter who has written scripts for movies such as Batteries Not Included, Critters 2, The Fly 2, and Hocus Pocus. The series score was composed by W.G. Snuffy Walden, who composed TV shows such as The Wonder Years and Roseanne, and would go on to compose The West Wing. And interestingly enough, The Stand has several cameos from horror movie directors. Stephen King himself stars in the series as a character called Teddy, along with Evil Dead and Spider-Man trilogy director Sam Raimi. An American Werewolf in London director John Landis also shows up in the movie, as does Child's Play and Fright Night director Tom Holland.
Not to be confusing him, of course, with Spider-Man Tom Holland.
Number 4. The original home media release was drastically cut. The Stand got a home video release during the 90s, which was released by Warner Brothers, and the release consisted of 2 VHS tapes. However, despite this, there were still big cuts made to the miniseries. I can remember watching The Stand on VHS, and so many scenes that I remembered watching on the TV show were simply gone. Nowhere to be found at all, and thus, despite its 2-tape packaging, the Stand home video release was a heavily cut version. This isn't the first time a King miniseries has had to be condensed, as when the Salem's Lot miniseries came out, it was decided to cut the 3-hour series down to an hour-and-a-half movie for a theatrical release. And both It and Tommyknockers were heavily cut for their VHS releases too. Interestingly, both It and The Stand had most of its cuts made to the later part of the miniseries, as opposed to evenly making cuts throughout the series' duration. With the arrival of DVD, The Stand got released again, this time not by Warner Brothers. In fact, here in Australia, its DVD was released by Paramount Pictures, to which thankfully all the cut scenes from the VHS release have now been restored.
And I mean there were huge cuts made to the Warner Brothers VHS release, as in entire subplots were taken out. But once again, thanks to digital media, The Stand could be seen in its entirety.
Number 3. Comic book adaptation. Indeed, from 2008 to 2012, Marvel Comics published a Stand comic book series, which of course was based on the Stephen King novel. And firstly, the artwork in this comic series is sensational. It looks both awe-inspiring and terrifying, creating imagery that looks like something from a nightmare. And because the comic book isn't restricted by TV censors, unlike the miniseries, the comic could go all out with shocking imagery, which no doubt would not have been allowed to be shown on TV in 1994. Not only can the comic improve on the imagery and shock factor of The Stand, but it also included elements from Stephen King's original unpublished 1,200-page manuscript from The Stand, finally giving fans a chance to see King's original vision and story. So if you're a fan of The Stand, then definitely check out the comic. And yeah, because the series was published by Marvel, I guess you can now say that The Stand takes place in the Marvel universe.
Wow, just imagine if Randall Flagg got his hand on the Infinity Gauntlet. Then we would all be doomed.
Number 2, real life illness led to a recast. The Stand features many well-known actors. Even some big-time Hollywood actors appear in small roles, such as Ed Harris and Kathy Bates, both of whom were uncredited. However, one interesting story involving the cast of The Stand revolves around the Judge Farris character, who was originally cast with Moses Gunn playing the part. However, in the movie's early days of filming, Gunn had increasingly become more and more ill due to bad health, to which he was let go of the production and sadly died in 1993, a year before the miniseries was aired. So famed film and television star Ossie Davis was then cast in the role. And he pretty much got the part because he was hanging around on the set, because his wife Ruby Dee was playing the pivotal role of Mother Abigail, who by the way was not 108 like the character said, but was in fact 71 at the time of filming, and the actress was just under heavy makeup, which actually shocks me as I always thought that they just got a really old lady for the role, so well done to them for pulling that off. Number 1, the return of Randall Flagg. It seems that just as with Pennywise, Randall Flagg is a personal favourite with Stephen King, and would go on to appear and be referenced in further books that he would go on to write. The character made his return in the novel The Eyes of the Dragon, which was published in 1984, 5 years after The Stand was published, where he's depicted as being a sinister wizard, in which we learn that even as far back as the medieval days, Flagg was trying to plummet the world into chaos. The character would also go on to become the main villain in the Dark Tower series, where he tries to take control of the powerful Dark Tower, otherwise known as the linchpin of existence. One thing is for sure, Randall Flagg's main goal is chaos. He seems to want to see civilization crumble into destruction, with him rising from the ashes and taking control. The character would be played by Matthew McConaughey in the 2017 Dark Tower movie, where his character went by one of Flagg's aliases, that being Walter, otherwise known as the Man in Black. So the big question is, who played the best live-action Randall Flagg? Jamie Sheridan or Matthew McConaughey?
The Stand is a great tale of good versus evil, the ultimate battle rising from the ashes of a now destroyed society. Okay, the miniseries may seem a little corny by today's standards. What with how the evil side consists of people wearing leather jackets and the good side consists of humble people wearing checkered shirts. It is still a pretty enjoyable miniseries, and the first episode where the virus breaks out is some pretty intense TV viewing and is still shocking to this day. I would actually be up for a modern movie interpretation of The Stand, but I think that like the modern It movies, it should be broken down into a series of films. Anyway, I'm Minty, and don't fear the Reaper. See ya! Hey guys, well today we're going to take a look at my Laserdisc collection. Now for those who don't know what Laserdisc is, during the 80s and 90s there was an alternative to video that was going to be an alternative to DVD, in that it was a giant digital disc that looked just like DVD, only it was the size of a record. Yes, and a lot of people actually say that Laserdisc actually had way superior picture quality to DVD. But obviously DVD caught on because it's more smaller, more compact, and with some particular long movies with Laserdisc, it would involve taking the giant disc out and then turning it around on the other side, and some really long movies supposedly even would require, 4 different sides, aka 2 discs. But regardless, there's something of a novelty now, there's something of a fascination, so today we are going to look into my collection. And first up we have Inner Space. Yep, good things come in small packages indeed. And as you can see here, we've got the movie poster with a whole lot of grey going on here for some reason. And yes, this is actually the size of a record. Like, I'll just compare the two quickly. This is a Laserdisc, and this is a record. So yeah, home entertainment in the 2000s very much could have looked very much like a stack of records. So going back to Inner Space, and as you can see, to watch this, it's actually got 3 sides, which is fascinating. That would take a lot of work and effort just to watch a film. Next up, we've got The Godfather on Laserdisc, a Laserdisc you can't refuse. Turn that around. And once again, just all pictures from the movie. Just seriously imagine what it would have been like going to like local video stores in the 2000s and you would have been taking things like this off the shelf. I like to think there's an alternate reality where that happened, because that is a very fascinating reality indeed. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Yes, remember people, we are not alone, and nor is disc technology, because there was also Laserdisc, and my god is this thing heavy! This package is a beast! This is really heavy. Soon we're going to open this up and see exactly what the contents are, and to show you guys what a Laserdisc actually looks like. And I'll use this one in particular because this is one heavy bastard right here. Once again, turn it around if I don't strain an arm muscle doing so. And we've got absolutely nothing. They put a lot of effort into packaging this thing up and making it heavy, but clearly having stills from the movie was just not happening. And here we have Cliffhanger, which sort of seems to be in like this protective shrink wrap thing, like records get. It's looking pretty cool. Got Sylvester Stallone just hanging around there. Once again, turn it around. Well, at least this one has actually pictures from the movie, so that's not bad. Yeah, what else can you say but, well, Cliffhanger. And of course, Cape Fear, the movie where Robert De Niro terrified us all. But, well, to be fair, there was lots of movies he did back in the day where he terrified us all. I've always liked this poster. This is actually something I would have hanging on my wall. This one's more lighter. This one isn't like Close Encounters where it feels like I'm holding a brick. This one's nice and slim and, you know, easy to fling around. Once again, here's the back of it. As you can see, they've worn a bit, so collectors, I would imagine, would try to preserve their Laserdisc to try and make them look nice, but yeah, you can see the years have sort of worn away a bit. And finally, but not least, coffee time! Coffee! Cappuccino! It's Dante's Peak, which is basically Jaws with a volcano. In that one person, in this case, Pierce Brosnan, can sense that something bad is going to happen to the town, only it's not a shark, it's a volcano, and no one believes him, and he has to fight through town politics. Yeah, this is a bit of an underrated film, I reckon. I actually think it's really enjoyable and has very impressive volcano effects, and no doubt one day I will make a video about it. There you go. Now let's have a look and see what these things look like on the inside. Right, so let's look inside. We have here Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And if you look, this thing really does sort of open up. I mean, look at the size of this thing. This is almost the size of a continent. This thing is huge. Look how much it opens up. In each one of these corners, there is a disc. And let's have a look at what the disc looks like. It has a white sleeve, quite similar to what you would see on a record, but oh, wait, look at this. And this is what they look like. Pretty crazy, really, isn't it? Wow, look at that. That looks cool. And for all you nerd buffs out there, you would probably recognize this from Back to the Future Part 2, where we can see in the year 2015, Laserdisc has now become obsolete and they are now being trashed, even though that never really happened because they died out way before 2015. So yeah, that was my look into my Laserdisc collection. Yeah, I know it's not a very impressive one, but it's a work in progress. Until next time, see yous!